What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Look, I love bringing on guests to talk about topics that, admittedly, I don't really know that much about, but I love the idea of exploring new concepts and new ideas. Now, what we're going to talk about today is not necessarily a new concept or a new idea, but we're going to put a whole new spin on it with our guest, Erin Delander from Much Love Interiors, who is a Feng Shui consultant. So, Erin, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, before we get into you and your career, let's talk a little bit about what Feng Shui actually is. So for someone who doesn't know or just has a very base understanding of it, what is Feng Shui?
So there's many schools of discipline of Feng Shui. The school of Feng Shui that I practice is called BTB Feng Shui, which stands for Black Sect Tantric Buddhism Feng Shui. And it's at least 3,000 years old, and it's transmitted verbally from expert to practitioner or client. And essentially what it is it's a combination of the teachings of the I Ching and derive it down to the Bagua, and that's what we use to read a room or a floor plan. Did I explain that well enough? It's pretty abstract.
I was about to say, I mean, I know my general understanding of it is, bringing harmony to, a room through design and through architecture. So when you walk into a room, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're feeling that the room needs in order to make it a bit of a more calming or more relaxing room to be in?
So it really depends. It depends on the person in the room, and it also depends on the room itself. So if I'm looking to make things calmer, then I might select a color that has a calming essence to it. If I'm trying to make someone feel more energized or maybe feel more seen in their career, that's totally different. So it all really depends on the person and their space.
That is one of the interesting things. So how much do you take the client's personality into the actual design of the room?
Very much so. For all of my Feng Shui consultations, I calculate their 9-star key, which is a form of Japanese numerology. And sometimes I dive into Western astrology a bit too. But it helps me to understand the person and their elemental makeup as a whole. And then I also ask them a bunch of different questions around what has been happening in their life and what they're seeking in the future.
Do you find that, when you're talking to a client and you're trying to discover kind of who they are, do you get a sense as well of, obviously we're a music-based podcast, so I do have to ask, do you find their musical taste actually plays into a little bit of, your ideas for design?
It can, definitely. Yeah. I really love working with people that have more of an elaborate music taste. So that's always very exciting to me to work with people that are into different forms of music.
Now, we talk about Feng Shui, but of course there's also interior design. So is there a difference between the two, between Feng Shui and interior design, or is it just basically one's just a different version of the other?
There is a big difference. So I went to school for what I would call more interior architecture. So it's understanding of how the walls meet the structure and how the whole space comes together as a whole. So your HVAC, your architecture, your electrical, all of that is what plays into interior design. It's not just what pillow you put on your sofa or what art you put on your wall. I like to think of that more as the frosting to the interior design, the decor of it. Now, Feng Shui is more of the metaphysical practice. So it has a lot to do with how someone is feeling in a space, but also how someone can use their space as a jumping off point for their future. And they kind of tie hand in hand, which is why I decided to get certified in Feng Shui after doing my my corporate world, interior design, interior architecture, career, so to speak. And so, yeah, they tie together, but they're very, very different.
I'm glad that you talked about the idea of corporate architecture and whatnot, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners have worked in some place where they walk into the office and the life just sucks right out of them. So like when you take a look at personal home architecture versus corporate architecture, and as far as the design goes, what can companies do in order to be able to kind of open up a more positive vibe to the actual room where people have to spend their 8 hours a day?
Sure. Lighting plays a big factor in that. I know that a lot of corporate spaces have fluorescent lighting, and that is just very draining because it has more of a blue hue to it. It's much better to have more natural daylight throughout that 8-hour period that someone is in a corporate office. Also, color and texture play into that. So a lot of the times when we think about a corporate space, we'll think about like very cold, hard textures, like a lot of flat, hard surfaces, white surfaces, very sterile kind of environments. If we add some different texture and some different artwork and different color to those environments, then it will help people feel more at ease when they're in the corporate space and develop less health issues from being in those corporate environments.
When you think about how some people relax more to, for lack of a better term, white noise, whether it be a fish tank or like a small little fountain kind of thing, like, it's a very small compact one. How much does, ambient sound come into the design of Feng Shui?
It doesn't really come into play as much in Feng Shui. However, I do use sound in Feng Shui. Now, for interior design, ambient noise is super important to understand as far as like absorptive materials and how sound transmits. And going back to the corporate spaces talk, you don't really want those spaces to like intermix, as far as there's a lot of open office plans now. So we want to be cognizant of people having other conversations around us and how the white noise can play a part into diminishing that sound transmission. In Feng Shui, I use sound in kind of a different way because I used it in more of like a chanting, meditation type, and then also we'll use bells and kind of clear the space of the energy, not so much with white noise though.
I find that interesting, that the idea of clearing away the energy. So like what kind of sounds, what kind of devices do you use in order to kind of go in there and just like create that calmness in a room?
I take tingsha bells typically when I go meet with clients for Feng Shui consultations. I wish I had them with me. I have this other bell that I use at my desk when I complete tasks. I'll like ring the bell. The chime sound really just like is a very clearing sound to like dissipate the energy, and then it helps people just feel like, okay, now I can like calm and settle into my space. And even when I travel and stuff, I'll take my tingsha bells and I'll like go around the space and kind of clear it, so then I feel like calm and settled in.
Now we're slowly but surely coming out of a 1.5 year long pandemic where people were pretty much told to like stay home, don't go anywhere. So you had people all of a sudden very much realizing, what they like or don't like about their space. Do you find that you were starting to get a lot more calls of people who just needed to, do something about their surroundings that they were going to be stuck in for longer than they ever thought possible?
Yes, absolutely. And I think now with like the housing market shifting the way it is, like people are aware that maybe it's not the best time to sell, so maybe we like change some things and feel more comfortable where we're at, and that's a lot of remodels have taken place because of that.
When you think about, I know when I was growing up, there was always that corner of the room that had the stereo and the headphones and just being able to tune out. So do you find, little corners like that, little like almost escapism corners work well in a house? And how do you go about, again, like dealing with individual clients, how do you go about creating those small little, for lack of a better term, cozy corners for them?
That's a really good question. It all depends on the client. If a client is looking for more of like a meditation space, then we'll kind of talk through what that means for them. I had one client specifically that she wanted to have a meditation space in her home, and it was just kind of cluttered. And so clearing away the clutter from that corner or that space of your house first and foremost before you then shift it into your relaxing zone, I think is huge, because then you're shifting that energy and then you're able to then bring in that relaxing energy that you want to that space for more of a meditative area, for lack of a better word.
I love that concept of just trying to declutter, the old saying of cluttered desk, cluttered mind. And I'm really happy that no one can see the desk that I've got here, but recording the podcast, right? But with shows like Marie Kondo's show coming out, where basically it's like kind of declutter your life. Do you find that's one of the first things you have to go to is like taking a look at someone's surroundings and go, yeah, we're going to have to clear this out?
Sometimes I get people like that, but I am not a professional organizer or a professional declutterer. I have a blog up actually about it that I'm like very clear that I am not a professional organizer. I have my own methods to decluttering, but yeah, a lot of times there are people that I go into their space and I'm like, yeah, we need to clear this out before we can do anything for you. So that does come into play a lot.
If the concept of Feng Shui is to create harmony through architecture and harmony through design, simply put, does a room sing to you?
Yes. Yes, it does.
So when you walk into a room, what are the first things that you look at? Like, do you have like a method that you just kind of scan through? Like, what's your checklist in order to make that room sing?
When it comes to Feng Shui, I want to make sure that things are in command. So specifically your stove, your desk, and your bed are in command position, which means that you are open to the world and the energies that are coming into you. In more of a simple term, you're facing the door, or there's a mirror that allows you to see behind you so that you can see the door. Now for interior design, people always are asking me, well, do you judge me based on like how my space is looking? And I'm like, well, I can't really go into every single person's space and judge what their space looks like if they're not hiring me to be their interior designer. So if they hire me to be their interior designer, then I would take a more critical look about the level of lighting, the finishes, the materials in the space, the noise transmission, as we've talked about. Is it really loud in there? Do they want it loud in there? Do they want it quiet? Do they want it peaceful? So it really just depends on what a client is hiring me for. And what I would look at in the space, because I try not to go into every space with like an ultra critical eye.
Now, earlier in the show, you mentioned that you practice BTB, so Black Sect Tantric Buddhist Feng Shui. So obviously that is one different type. So what are the different types of Feng Shui and how do they differ from the other? There's no school of thought in Feng Shui that is wrong, is what we believe in BTB Feng Shui. Some of the other ones are compass Feng Shui, directional. There's all sorts of them. People would have to go out there and look it up a bit. But I specifically practice BTB Feng Shui, which is really about putting yourself in the command position, like I said, with the
the bed, the desk, and your stove, most specifically.
So when a client comes to you and asks about feng shui, with most things that are of a spiritual nature, you are going to get some skeptics. So for people who are skeptical, for listeners who are like, oh, this is interesting, but I still don't get it, what do you say to skeptics of feng shui?
I love a skeptic. I love a skeptic. Let me show you, is what I tell them. You know, it's really not always about doing the metaphysical cures. It has a lot to do with the mundane stuff too. Like, do you have leaky pipes in your house? That can cause a lot of health issues. So it's more about that. It's like, well, let me show you, and we'll prove to you why. Like, if you're still a skeptic after I show you, then we'll leave it at that. But yeah, I love a skeptic because it really opens it up to a conversation, I would say.
Now, on your website, you also talk about virtual construction, you know, being able to kind of like, you know, design the room. And I'm sure that's probably helped quite a bit over the last, 18 months. But when it comes to dealing with, creating harmony in the room, how does, doing a virtual design translate to the actual design? And do you find that doing it virtually first helps, or doing it virtually, you do things and then all of a sudden you get there and go, okay, so this was a good starting point, but now we're going to really get into it?
Okay, so I should clarify that the virtual construction is from a past career of mine when I was in the construction world, doing more along the lines of BIM and a lot of technology. And it certainly helped for those clientele, because certain clientele really need to see how a space is going to be built over time. And it also helps with the field personnel too, to like see how the steel would be put in place. So then, like, for example, a superintendent could catch if something was off on his schedule. Now, bringing it back to what I'm doing currently, I do a lot of virtual consultations with Feng Shui clients, which has been incredible over the last 18 months. And it has really opened up who I can do consultations for. So not just in Denver or in Colorado, I've done consultations for people all over the country. And so that's really exciting for me to be able to open up my business and do things more virtually in that manner. Did that answer the question? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
But it does lead me to wonder, though, with the architecture background that you do have, obviously when you're dealing with a room, you're dealing with the pre-built architecture. There are load-bearing walls that we can't really take down because, well, the house might fall down. So how often do you come into situations where the architecture is actually fighting against what you want to do to create harmony in the room?
Sometimes that happens. For Feng Shui stuff, not always for interior design, because there's obviously opportunities to remodel with interior design. But with Feng Shui, I've come across some really strange things where I'm like, I don't know how this architecture is going to play a part into the harmony of this, but there's always like little adjustments that we can do, lots with mirrors and other devices that we can adjust things and hopefully help bring harmony to the space. And if it's just like not right for the person altogether, then I would probably suggest that they find a different space. And that's the very last resort that I would go to. Yeah,
the last resort should not be knock down the load-bearing wall. That would be bad.
Exactly.
So
do everything we can not to do that.
Exactly. That might be, house limiting, I would think.
Yes.
So when you've done the design and you bring the client into, the finished room, how do you know? How do you know that you've nailed it? How do you know that the room is now doing what the intended purpose of it is?
Well, I think that goes back to what you said before, is that the room sings to you. So how does it sing to you when you go in after it's finished? If it's singing to you like, oh my gosh, like this space just feels so incredible, then that's how you know it's a successful project.
All right, this is the Made You a Mixtape podcast. We're talking Feng Shui with Feng Shui consultant Erin Delander from Much Love Interiors. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Erin. You've heard it all before. Waste of film. Dumpster fire. How did this even get made? Train wreck. Total garbage. Snooze fest. Utterly painful. Worst film ever. But is it really? The show is called It's Not That Bad, and we dare to look at the lowest rated shows and movies and see only the good things. We're looking for A grades in B movies. It's Not That Bad. Listen now, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, welcome back to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. Our guest today, Erin Delander from Much Love Interiors. Now, Erin, what was it that inspired you to jump into interior design and then to study Feng Shui?
From a very, very young age, I remember just like laying out my Barbie's houses in a specific way and drawing floor plans. Like, Mom, look, this is what your house could look like at like a very, very young age. And then I discovered Frank Lloyd Wright, and I was like, oh, I have to go to architecture school. In high school, I took an interior design class, and that's what propelled me to get into the interior design school at Colorado State University. I also was accepted into the construction management program at the same time. So I have dual degrees from Colorado State University. Then I went into the corporate world and was in that for quite some time, and really just discovered that there was something missing from my life. And like, did yoga teacher training, that wasn't quite it. Like, how can I implement this spirituality into the corporate structure of interior architecture? And that is when I discovered Feng Shui and the Mindful Design School, and I got certified to be a Feng Shui practitioner. And that is when I was inspired to launch my business, and here we are today.
I find it interesting that, you studied architecture, and when you think about architecture, it's very mathematical. It's very analytical because, the math is off, the building's going to go down. When it comes to, design and Feng Shui, it's very spiritual. So at what point did you actually sit there and say, okay, I'm done with the analytical. I want to explore more of the spiritual side of design?
So I've always had health issues throughout my life, and I had a really bad health issue scare in 2019, and that was really what prompted me to dive a lot more into the spiritual side of things. I had always kind of done yoga, meditation practices along the way, but it never really dawned on me that the energy of a space can vastly impact the health of a person. So that was where I was like, I need to do something different than just architecture and construction in the corporate world. I have to do something that helps people on an energetic level. So does that answer it? Okay.
I think so. But it's interesting because, I'm sure you have people who, maybe are dealing with chronic health issues, maybe are dealing with maybe mental health issues, whether it be depression or something along those lines. So do you take a look at, the career, not necessarily change, but career diversion, going from architecture to design and Feng Shui as a way of you kind of paying it forward? Like, I was able to do this for my own life because of my own situation. Now I can turn and help others. And, do you find that it helps, others who are having those kind of issues?
Yeah, and in fact, it kind of makes me emotional to think about, because it is like, that is the purpose of what I'm doing, like to do more wellness spaces, whether it's in corporate wellness spaces or whether it's just at your home. Like, I really want everyone to feel healthy and happy and productive in their spaces, supported. Yeah.
When you think about the usage of music as therapy. Do you feel that Feng Shui can also be, utilized as a therapeutic tool for people who need it?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Now let's get back to young Erin for a second here. Like the days of the Barbie house, the days of
the band girl. Yeah, I was a flute player, by the way, the first chair flute player. So we can put that out there.
Those early days, in Erin's room, like how often did you find yourself rearranging your room for whatever mood at the time?
My mom was kind of strict about the furniture placement, so it was more so just my Barbie's houses. But whenever I had an opportunity, I'd be like, Mom, let's do this and ship things. And I think my dad was a little bit more open to it. My parents were divorced, so I had split houses. So things like shifting my bed around or getting a new comforter was slightly easier to ask for than being like, hey, I'm going to rearrange my entire bedroom right now.
Mom, ignore the noise. I'm just moving the bed. It's okay.
Great. Yeah. Don't worry. Everything's okay.
I didn't fall down. We're all good. But when you think about those early days, is there a room that you remember, and it's not necessarily in either of your parents' rooms or parents' houses, but a room that you remember that just felt right to you?
I mean, my bedroom when I was younger certainly did, because it's like my little sanctuary. You're a preteen teenager, angsty and trying to get away from everyone. I just remember like being in there and playing my music all the time. My mom constantly being like, turn it down, So I just feel like my bedroom was like really my sanctuary then.
Now, when you think about those days of, hiding in the room and listening to the music, at probably inappropriate levels, but that's okay. What was the music that you were playing in order to be able to kind of, disassociate from anything else that was going on?
A lot of rock and metal music then. I still listened to rock and metal. It was kind of what I was raised on. When we were in band, actually, I actually have my mixtape. I'll just like pull it up and I can tell you songs if you're ready for me to tell you songs.
Well, I think that's a perfect time to jump into this. So, okay. Erin, if you had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, hi, I'm Erin, you hand them a mixtape, and on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape, and why are those songs there?
This was so challenging because just narrowing it down to a few songs is really difficult for me, because I have such a wide range of music that I listen to. So I'm going to do my best with this and keeping it to just 10 for Okay, so Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap was the first one that I put on. The reason that I put that one on there was because it was one of the songs that I did a solo in band, and it was really when I found myself wanting to go to interior design school, and also recognizing the balance of using my right brain, left brain. The Patient by Tool, because I've always had health issues, and that song just really speaks to me as someone that has lupus and has constantly gone through stuff. So Find Your Cloud by Papadosio. Your viewers might not know these songs, but I liked that one because it was something that I listened to when I was in college, and it just really was inspiring to go out and find your dream and live it to the fullest. And then Ring Around the Moon by Elephant Revival. I really love the moon, so the song just kind of speaks to me and kind of like this connection to the moon that I have. It doesn't ultimately tie into my career or anything. It speaks to who I am as like a moon person. And then The Lion, the Beast, and the Beat by Grace Potter and the Nocturnals. That song I remember playing on repeat before going to Burning Man my first time, and just like really feeling it as like, this is like my launch point into a new creative realm. Like, I'm going to go out and experience all of these creative people and something different. So that one, and then Legendary by Welshly Arms, because I've always like seen myself as this visionary and just really want to leave this legacy of a company, even if it is more spiritually based practice. And let's see, what am I think I'm going to be over 10.
Oh, that's totally fine.
Okay. So Shroud by Nathaniel Rateliff, because there was a period in my life where I felt like I was like covering myself up and not really showing the world what I could give to them, which kind of goes into the like, now I'm giving out my spirituality to the world so that then they can live happier and healthier. And Drop by Drop by the California Honey Drops, just because I just feel like there's like little savors in life that we have to enjoy along the way, even as we're developing our own business or as we're going through a pandemic, you know. I think I'm going to leave it there.
I love that you brought up Burning Man, and I personally have never been to Burning Man. I do find it fascinating. So, as someone who is into design and you know, into the art of it all, how is it for you when you go to Burning Man? Do you find inspiration in what's kind of going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I love going around and seeing all of the different sculptures and art. That's honestly my favorite part about Burning Man. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's a crazy party. There's so much creativity and art out there that's what I really thrive off of going there for. So I've been 3 times and hope to go again someday when they do another build.
Now, to anyone who's never even heard of Burning Man, how would you describe it to them?
It is a wild week in the desert that you experience all of your human emotions during that entire week, and also meet some of the greatest people that you would ever meet in your lifetime.
Now, on your mixtape, you had Tool on there and some other, you know, heavier music and all that. But, you know, when you think about, you know, what the purpose of Feng Shui is, you know, Tool isn't necessarily, you know, the music that would come to mind. So when you're designing and when you're, you know, for lack of a better term, harmonize in a room, do you use music in order to help inspire how you're changing the room in order to create harmony?
For the client or for myself?
For yourself.
For myself, yes. So I'll listen to different piano music a lot of the time when I'm designing to kind of like stay focused on things, or like solfeggio frequencies. It like really helps me stay focused when I'm working. Now, if there's a client that I'm like really inspired by, then heck yeah, I'm gonna put Tool on in the background. Like, that's awesome if they're into that kind of music, and it helps me bring out that energy for myself in their design.
Now, you mentioned that you suffer from lupus and whatnot. Oftentimes when people are dealing with a medical condition, you know, and when it's really tough, you know, that they lean on music as a coping mechanism. So, you know, if you had to think about it, is there one song, you know, I know you mentioned Tools, The Patient, all that, but do you find yourself, like, when times are tough, like leaning on music to kind of take away from anything that you're dealing with?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that music is so powerful to invoke emotions in us or distract from different emotions. You know, like going through a breakup, you want to listen to heartbreak songs, or if you're in a happy mood, or if you're trying to get going for your day, I like to listen to more dance music, like 80s style dance music. I love that. It just like something that brings you to that mindset, I think is so important no matter what you're doing. And I listen to music all day long. Like it's really kind of absurd. I was listening to music before I hopped on this podcast. So
all right, I'm going to put you on the spot here for our last question, Erin. So are you ready for this? If you were to think of the most calm, harmonious room that you could possibly think of to put yourself in, like if you were designing a room for yourself, and as we mentioned, a room sings after the design is done, what song would the perfect room sing to you?
That's such a good question.
I told you I was going to put you on the spot.
I know. Oh, I'm not sure if you want it to be calming. If I wanted to be in a space that I wanted to feel calm in, I think that it would have to be something folk music related, and probably Henry Jamison, Through the Glass. Like that song just kind of like calms me. I feel very soothed during that song.
Okay, so for anyone who is now listening to the podcast and is inspired to maybe go after a career in Feng Shui, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to reach out to Mindful Design School to get certified, or contact me and I'll put them in touch with them if they want to get certified. Now, if they just want to experience Feng Shui, I would be happy to do a consultation for anyone. But yeah, that's my advice to anyone. Don't DIY your Feng Shui. It's the best advice I could possibly give.
Or knock down load-bearing walls, because that's bad too.
That too, yeah.
Erin, thank you so much for this. Where can people find you on social media, and how can they get in touch with Much Love Interiors?
They can find me on my website, muchloveinteriors.com. And I'm also on Instagram, much_love_interiors. And I think that's the best way to find me.
Erin, thank you so much for this. And to our listeners, thank you all for listening to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. If you're listening to us on an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire interview over on YouTube. But if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you can head on over to any of your podcatching apps, download, and listen on the go. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, Jason.